Welcome to the Thermopolium, the Roman fast food counter, and your life just got significantly worse. Let's actually put you there, because I don't think people appreciate how physical this job was. It's about 4 in the morning. You know this not because of a clock, but because the sky is a specific shade of dark and someone older and angrier than you has decided it's time. The first thing you need to do is grind grain, not scoop pre-measured flour out of a bag. Grind actual wheat kernels by hand on a stone quern, two heavy circular stones, the top one with a wooden handle you rotate manually. Over and over, for an hour, maybe two, until you have enough flour for the day's bread. Your hands will blister, then the blisters will pop, then they'll callus, and then you'll just stop noticing because there's no alternative. Okay, grain is ground. Now the oven. The Thermopolium oven was wood-fired, which sounds rustic and charming until you are the one managing it. Getting it to temperature takes time, takes judgment, takes experience that nobody has explained to you because in ancient Rome, you learned by watching and by getting things wrong and suffering the consequences of getting things wrong. There are no oven mitts. There is no temperature dial. There's fire, there's stone, and there's your arm reaching into the vicinity of both. Burns were so common among Roman food workers that they essentially weren't worth mentioning in the sources, which is its own kind of grim statement. We know from archaeological analysis of skeletal remains that healed burn scarring on the forearms was basically standard, not remarkable, just part of the job. And here's the thing about burns in a world without antibiotics. A bad burn doesn't just hurt, it gets infected. An infected burn in 100 AD is a potentially life-altering injury. There's no popping into urgent care, there's no prescribed antibiotic. You pack it with whatever the local remedy is. Honey was actually used and had some genuine antimicrobial properties, so that's something. But you're mostly hoping it heals cleanly while you continue working on it, because the alternative is not working, and not working means not eating. The oven gets up to temperature around sunrise. The city is waking up. And here's where your modern fast food experience stops being useful at all. Because in a McDonald's, the worst customer interaction is someone being rude about their order, maybe throwing something at the counter. Bad, obviously, but there are cameras, there are managers, there are policies, there is at minimum the social contract of a contemporary society with laws and enforcement. In a Roman Thermopolium, if you're a slave or a freed person of low status, which is most of the people doing this work, you have essentially no legal recourse if a customer decides to express their frustration physically. And Roman customers, particularly wealthy ones, had very little restraint about doing exactly that. We have accounts of Roman food sellers being beaten by dissatisfied customers. We have legal texts that discuss the question of liability when a Thermopolium worker was injured by a patron, and the legal framework itself tells you this was common enough to need a framework. The discussion isn't can this happen, it's when this happens, who is responsible and to what degree. The answer, if you were a slave, was essentially nobody. You were property. Your injury was property damage, and property damage was the owner's problem, not yours. So you're serving customers from behind a stone counter, and the counters in Roman Thermopolia were stone, with circular openings where the ceramic containers of food sat like a hot bar. You're ladling out whatever is in those containers, lentils probably, grain porridge, stew with whatever meat was available, which in Rome's street food context meant the cheapest cuts of the cheapest animals, heavily seasoned with garum, which is fermented fish sauce, to cover whatever was happening underneath. And garum, by the way, if you haven't encountered a description of garum production before, was made by layering fish and salt in large vats and letting it ferment in the sun for weeks to months. The smell was apparently extraordinary. We know this because multiple Roman writers mentioned that garum production facilities were banned from certain areas of cities because of the odor. You work with the stuff all day. It's in your clothes, your hair, your skin. You smell like it constantly. The customers keep coming. Rome didn't have a strong domestic cooking culture among the urban poor. Most people in Roman cities lived in insulae, apartment blocks that had no kitchen facilities, and were so fire-prone that cooking in them was often effectively prohibited. The Thermopolium wasn't a convenience. For a huge portion of Rome's population, it was the only option. So you're not dealing with occasional foot traffic, you're dealing with a steady stream of people who need to eat and have limited patience and varying levels of social inhibition about how they express that impatience. The lunch rush, and there was one. Romans ate their main meal in the early afternoon. He's just continuous. You're ladling, you're refilling containers from the larger pots behind you, you're managing the fire, you're handling money. Roman coins were heavy bronze and copper for the smaller denominations. You're making change by feel and memory, because there's no register, no screen telling you what the difference is, just your mental arithmetic under pressure while someone is actively shouting at you. You don't get a break in the modern sense. You eat when there's a gap, standing up, probably eating the same food you've been serving all day because that's what's available. You drink water that has, optimistically, been carried from a public fountain that morning. Rome had remarkable water infrastructure, the aqueducts were genuinely impressive, but that didn't mean the water sitting in a container in a thermopolium since dawn was pristine by mid-afternoon. The afternoon stretch is somehow worse than the morning. You're tired. The fire has been going for hours and the workspace is hot in a way that has nothing to do with weather. It's radiant heat from the oven, constant and inescapable. Your feet hurt in a way that feels structural, not just muscular, because the floor is stone and there's no mat, and the sandals you're wearing, if you're wearing any, are thin leather that stopped providing meaningful support some time ago. And then there's the supply problem. In a McDonald's, a truck shows up on a schedule. Product arrives, you stock it. The system is, whatever else you want to say about it, reliable. In a Roman thermopolium, you are dependent on the market, which means you or someone you work with went to the market this morning, negotiated for food, carried it back, and whatever you got is what you have. If the grain merchant's price was high today, your margins are tighter. If the meat was poor quality, you dealt with it because there wasn't another option. If you run out of something midday, you run out. There's no calling the supplier. You improvise or you disappoint customers, and we've already discussed what disappointed customers might decide to do about it. The day ends not because a manager tells you it's over, but because the food runs out or the light goes and there's no practical way to continue. You clean up, and cleaning a room and food counter means scrubbing stone with whatever abrasive is available, managing the ash from the oven, disposing of food waste in a city that had a waste management system of varying quality depending on the neighborhood. Then you go home, which in all probability is a small room in an insula that you share with other people, with no furniture to speak of, where you will sleep on something that is technically a bed only in the loosest sense of the word, and be back at this counter before sunrise tomorrow. No sick days, no paid time off, no workers' compensation, no HR department. Just the grain, the fire, the customers, and the stone counter between you and all of it. Every single day.